Chapter 6 deals with websites and in general the digital footprint that we have in the business world. That includes things like websites, social media, and so forth. And this is an area that everyone, and I assume all of you have a lot of experience with, but it's important enough that we spend a little bit of time focusing on some of the aspects of this. Now, this is just really an overview when it comes to e-commerce and e-commerce on mobile devices. You could have an entire class just on e-commerce. And in fact, the college does. BA 207 is just strictly on e-commerce. But let's take a look at a few key points. One of the things that comes up with is the idea, the concept with the domain names. The issue is who controls who gets to use what name for their website. There has to be a traffic cop, someone that is saying you can use that name, or no, someone else already has the rights to that domain. The company that manages all of that is ICANN. And you see big fancy name, Internet Corporation, their job is simply to assign the names that are used on the internet for websites and to keep a record of that as to who owns that, who has paid for the rights to have exclusive access to that. They also maintain the database that translates the human-friendly name like mypcc.edu to the actual numeric data that is used on the internet. That's just a series of numbers. So as I said, they oversee those lists, and you notice I put in the parentheses there is not a single list. There are copies of the list of the domain names and where that name gets pointed to, located all around the world. And the reason why that's important to remember is that if you make a change in who hosts your website, the name of your website can remain the same, but the digital address for your website will probably change because you're using a different hosting server and it has a different base address. And so that gets updated when you make a change. But because these are scattered all around the world, not all of them get updated immediately. And so it can take a day or two for all of those databases to get resynced with the new location for your website. So if you make a change, make sure you keep your old website active for a couple of days before you completely shut it down so that all the traffic gets pointed to the new website. One of the things that ICANN also is concerned about, and governments are concerned about this idea, it's called cyber squatting and typo squatting. And in particular, what typo squatting is, I have a business name and it has an unusual spelling. And so people will often get the spelling of my website incorrect. So if the owner, the company, my company, did not think about, well, how about if someone accidentally misspells our name? So let's say our company is Peterson Supply. Now you can spell Peterson with an O-N at the end, or Petersen, E-N. And so depending on how someone has heard the name said or remembered it, they might type in Peterson, O-N, or Petersen, E-N. if my company name is the first, Peter Son, O-N, and I did not register the EN version of it, someone else could register that website. And then when a person, maybe it's only 5% of the people that mistype it, but that 5%, they get directed to the other website, and maybe that's a malicious website or a cyber criminal. So that's the typo squatting. It's when someone recognizes, there are some common misspellings for this and they haven't been registered. And so what they will do is grab them up for using malicious things. Cyber squatting is the idea of, I recognize that there would be a use, some names when something is just getting started. I'm trying to think of a good example right now. Something brand new comes onto the market. Let's think about when the iPhone was first released. Maybe someone thought, I bet you there's going to be a bunch of other I type names. So iCloud, iBackup, iPhotos, and so you go ahead and you just grab all those names. Now someone comes up with a really good product, a cloud drive, and they say, I'd really like to, this is Apple saying, I would really like to use iDrive to indicate my cloud storage. Someone already has the name. So in fact, when you look at it with Apple's, their drive, we have Microsoft has OneDrive, Google has Google Drive, Apple has iCloud. And the reason they have iCloud is because iDrive was already taken. So cyber squatting is the idea that you don't really intend to use the name, but you think someone will want it in the future. And so you grab it up. And then when they want it, you say, well, sure, I will let you have it for $100,000. So that's the cyber squatting and typo squatting are a couple of the issues we have around managing these unique domain names that we use for the internet. One of the key things when we're looking at doing commerce electronically, not in person, brick and mortar, face-to-face stores, is the user interface design. It's extremely important. The first thing is you look at it from a usability standpoint. And by that, what the author means is, how easy is it to use this thing? If I go to a website and I want to purchase shoes, how many clicks does it take before I get to the type of shoes that I'm interested in? If it takes 20 clicks to get there, that's not very usable. It's not very user-friendly. If it takes 2 or 3, well, that's pretty darn good. So usability is making it easy for the purchaser to find what they want and complete the purchase. Now, an example of this, when I was with a nonprofit here locally, and our version of e-commerce was people making online donations. And I heard back from a number of our donors that the checkout process, the completion of the donation was very difficult. And so I spent a lot of time analyzing it, and and I found I agreed with their assessment. It was a process that I had inherited when I took on that role, and so redesigned it to make it easy for someone to complete that transaction. Another issue we have to deal with is not everybody has the same vision capabilities, the to be able to read and or language skills. And so we have this accessibility issue when we're designing the web. My dad, for example, was partially colorblind. He could not tell the difference between red and green. So if you're using colors to indicate things on your website, that can be a problem for someone who has some visual impairments. So you have to be thinking about that. Everything that we're doing, is it really essential for what we're presenting on the website? And is it affecting that ability for everyone to be able to easily access it? We want everyone to have equal access. The other real issue to be aware of is this idea of broadband. Not everyone lives in a city that has access to really high-speed internet and can afford to pay for it. There's still a lot of people in this country and certainly around the world that have very poor internet connections. So you can design a really fancy website, all these, high resolution graphics and things going on that take forever to work on a slower internet connection. And that really goes back to the usability issue, that it needs to work regardless of whether someone has the latest and greatest, best, fastest internet connection. And that also goes with computer or mobile phone hardware as well. Not everyone can afford to upgrade their technology all the time. So you have to make sure, again, that what you're doing is essential and that it doesn't, isn't compromised if someone is not able to benefit from the latest technology and high-speed bandwidth. The other thing to be cognizant of, and I'll show a slide here in a minute, more on the mobile, and that more and more people are doing e-commerce on mobile devices. And there's a whole different set of issues when you're working with a mobile device. And so again, you have to think about your user interface. Not only does it need to work on a desktop, laptop, tablet, but even on a cell phone. So like the author had a few tips. These are great tips, regardless of what the device is that you're displaying your e-commerce on, is to start with a really well-designed flow to your website. It's structured. It has a clear and consistent design. It's easy for people to recognize throughout the site. I've been on sites where as you go from page to page, the next arrow or the back arrow, or it keeps changing. It's not in the same place on every page. So you want to make sure you have a consistent template and design. Now, fortunately, there are some just wonderful web design tools out there that make that very easy to have a very structured. Sadly, there's a lot of companies, even some very large companies, that don't understand some of that. The next one is really great. Keep it simple. Again, you want to make it easy for the person to find what they want, make their purchase, and they're done. We all want things done quickly. No one wants to spend an hour trying to make a transaction. So again, if it's not necessary, don't do it. Keep the process simple. I like this one too, that when something significant has changed on a website, have some nice way of pointing out to users that, well, we've changed how this goes. Whether you do that with a pop-up or at the beginning or some way, just to let them know that things are different. It cracks me up when I get a dial into a company. I'd say 9 times out of 10 in their outgoing message, it'll say, our options have changed. Please listen carefully. Um, I think they overdo that a lot. That's too many, but it's that idea of pointing out to someone that don't assume that the way to accomplish this is the same as it was. And that's kind of leads into this next one. Assume that people are going to click on the wrong button. Make it easy for them to cancel or to back out. You know, certainly with your checkout process, you need to give someone the ability to see everything before they say yes. Complete the transaction and make it easy for them to back out and say, "Oh no, I need to edit that." Uh, the distractions. I've been to sites where you have all these moving images or videos or other things. Uh, those are all just gimmicks. They aren't accomplishing anything for you. When someone is on there, give them the information they need, nothing else, nothing more. You want those unnecessary choices or other things on there. It's back to really that second bullet. Keep it simple. Okay, so mobile devices deserve a little bit of a focus. And as you can see from the chart, there's a reason why. Look at the growth, that curve from 2019 to 2025. That's a very steady increase. And in fact, you can see that in 2025, it was estimated that 44% of all e-commerce was going to occur on a mobile device. So not on desktops, but on phones, tablets, laptops. That's a significant, and it wouldn't surprise me that the 2025 ends up being greater than 50%. So what are some of the good news, bad news about that situation? So the positives, mobile devices are portable. So along with that portability, what that really means is that people can be engaged in e-commerce on their mobile device 24/7 in virtually anywhere. Whereas when you're dealing with a desktop on the e-commerce, it's only when people are at home, have access to their desktop computer. So it limits the potential access. But another nice thing with the mobile device is that if the location services are turned on, then you can know if a person is close by to Home Depot and Home Depot is having a special sale now. And so when they open up to, check their mail or whatever else, you can provide location appropriate advertisements based on knowing where they are physically are. Personally, I find that irritating as a user. I turn off my location. One is I don't particularly like Google and others tracking my movements. But it is one possible positive that if the location is turned on, that you can present information to the person with the mobile device that is appropriate based on their physical location. Now, some of the challenges, of course, the big one is screen size. You have to really think about what you're going to show in the way of images when you're talking about a mobile device. The screen is just small. So you really do need to have two versions of your e-commerce site. One that is suitable for larger screens, laptops and desktops, and one that is suitable for the smaller phone screen sizes. Now, they should be similar in how they function, but you will have to um, make changes that allow you to optimize really for both situations. Another challenge is the keyboard. Don't be asking someone to type in a whole bunch of stuff in order to check out, because it's not as easy on a phone to do that as it is on a keyboard. So think about that. It goes back to that one thing about keep it simple. If you can avoid having someone having to type in a lot of information, that's a good idea. The other issue to be concerned with is the bandwidth. Now, we already talked about that not everyone lives in an area where they have access to high-speed bandwidth, but that can become even more so with a mobile device. The um, the access that they have to a Wi-Fi, maybe they're using a public Wi-Fi, which, by the way, I strongly encourage you do not use public Wi-Fis to do any financial transactions. But the particular wireless network that they are able to tie into may not have the bandwidth. And so again, it comes down to it's another reason why to keep it simple, and the graphics and the images, lower resolution. They need to look good, but they don't have to look perfect. Okay. Another thing to be concerned about, and this feeds back to what I was just talking about with keyboards, is when you're going to make the payment and they're using a mobile device, having to type in a 16-digit, credit card number is a little cumbersome. And all the smartphones now have built in with them a variety of different payment systems. There's Google Pay, there's PayPal, Samsung has a Samsung Pay, all kinds of different wallets that are available that store that credit card information, but allow you to very easily, with just a few taps, to complete the transaction and not have to type in all that information. So make sure your website is set up to accept those mobile payment systems. And again, this is what I was kind of talking about before, that you have to design a version of your website for mobile devices. Now, the good news is that websites automatically know when someone is accessing them, are they accessing from a mobile device or from a desktop? What it actually knows is part of the browser configuration information. It tells the website what the screen size is and what the operating system is that's being used. And so it can make that decision and say, okay, well, based on that, we're going to use the desktop version of the website, or based on that, we're going to use the mobile version. The author has a list for some tips for mobile-friendly designs, and there's a few here I wanted to point out. The first is that you display the most important things first. You want to present to that potential customer the key piece of information that you want them to understand about your company or your products. You only have a few seconds. If someone isn't engaged with you, they're going to go on and do something else. So focus on that first thing. What is that message, that image that you want to get across to them? The other is, remember, this is a mobile device, so the fonts have to be bigger. I've been to some websites where the font size they were used probably looked okay if I was looking at it on a desktop computer, but on a mobile device, I had to use the 2-finger thing to enlarge it, and then it's, you have to scroll left and right, a real pain. So make sure that the fonts are easily read even on a small device. And that leads right into also any links or buttons that people need to activate. They need to be big enough so that our fat fingers, we can get on the right thing. Don't put multiple things really close together to where you hit the wrong one. That goes back to the making it easy for people to use. And the last one, excuse me, uh, have a really thorough team of testers and get people that have different cell phones. So the two major ones these days, you're either an Android or you're an iPhone. So get a mixture of both, but also within that, get some older Androids, newer Androids, older iPhones, newer iPhones. Have a wide variety of every possible thing, and then ask people to test the living daylights out of it. You want to find any problems and fix them before you release the next version of your website. You don't want to be having to respond to customers when you launch your new website and all of a sudden you're getting 30% of the people are saying, hey, I can't make this work on my phone, especially because you know that if 30% said it, there's probably at least another 30 or 40% that had problems but didn't bother to let you know. Okay, when it comes to online advertising, another mistake that people sometimes make is saying, well, that's Google. And it's true that Google is the major player. You can see from this chart, it shows, 70%. That's substantial. But if you focus just on Google, you're missing out on 30% of your potential market. So you really need to make sure that your online advertising that you're hitting, not just Google, but really look at Bing and Baidu. Baidu is a Chinese. Uh, their focus is primarily outside of the US, but we're seeing more and more of their stuff here in the US as well. Some terms you may hear is click-through rate, and that's what that refers to is when someone advertises on the web, how do they pay for the advertising? One is they pay for the number of clicks. And so what that means is that if an ad is shown to a person, did they click on the ad or not? That's the click-through rate. So if you display this really nice ad and it encourages 80% of the people who see that ad say, oh, I'm interested in that, and they click on that, that's your click-through rate of 80%. Another way that online advertising works is through the use of cookies. And I know you've all seen the prompts that says allow cookies or only essential cookies. It's basically just storing on your device, whether it's a smartphone or a desktop computer, it's storing some information about you and it's associating it with a particular website. For example, if you put some things in your shopping cart at, let's say Home Depot, we'll use them again. But for whatever reason, you decide not to complete the transaction. The next time you come back to that website, even if you go to, you look at other products on there and so forth, you go to your shopping cart and the stuff you had previously put in the shopping cart is still there. That's because it stored a cookie on your computer that said these items are in the shopping cart. It's also a way with advertising that you can say, based on information on what you were looking at last time. Now, let's say you looked at something, but you didn't actually put it in the shopping cart. And you notice, and you'll notice this with Amazon in particular, something that you just looked at. Next time you go to Amazon, there are ads popping up for similar items to that. That's because a cookie was stored saying that you looked at something. Maybe you didn't purchase it, but you were interested. The other thing that you can do with your online advertising is really zero in, and this is where online advertising is so much different than traditional advertising. Like an ad that comes on the TV or on the radio. Everyone gets the same ad at the same time. With online, we can target our advertising and saying, I don't want everyone to get this ad. I only want people who match this criteria to get the ad. And we can, control that very precisely through digital profiles that are out on they're on all of us. The example is you probably don't need to to show a senior citizen an ad for wedding venues. Now, maybe they might be interested in helping a grandchild or something, but uh, you know, there are other things that they are interested in. So you can decide where you're going to spend your advertising money on, the people who are your target market, and say, I'm going to focus on those. So it does give you that ability to really zero in your advertising and be more efficient with your advertising. Let's see, search engine. What else I want to say? Oh, okay. That's wanted to get to this next slide. One of the mistakes, I mean, it's easy to think about, gee, with this online, I don't need to pay for things. I'm going to market, through social media, because social media marketing doesn't cost me anything. That's a mistake. There's an expense associated with doing a good social marketing campaign. Now, some of the tools may be free. It may not cost me anything to post an ad on Facebook Marketplace. But if it's going to be effective, I have to pay someone to be developing that, monitoring that, tracking it, analyzing it, in order to really get the benefit from that. Social media marketing is not free. It can be very effective, but you need to budget appropriately and be willing to invest the resources necessary to make it work. This is funny. That's included in the textbook. People talk about Web 2.0. There is no such thing. It's a made-up term. It was speaker he was giving. He was talking about the internet, and he was envisioning a new um, implementation, evolution of the internet, how it would be going into the future. And so he called it Web 2.0. There is no document anywhere that defines and says this is what Web 2.0 is. But what it has come to mean is, what people are really talking about is Web 1.0 was companies pushing information to people. Web 2.0 is really about a two-way street. Companies still provide information to users, but users can provide information to the companies, and users can provide information to other users. And a key example is crowdsourcing, is where a company has a need for something, they put the word out, the word gets moved around. So it's just this idea more of a two-way communication that's going on. And one of the keys with Web 2.0, and I've seen people talk about, what Web 3.0 looks like. Again, they're not official documents. They're just used to just kind of describe major changes in how things are going. But a key with Web 2.0 is that we're always learning. We're always getting, more information, making changes, constant evolving. So that's it for chapter 6. Like I said, I could spend an entire course on e-commerce, and in fact, I do teach an entire course on e-commerce.